Has anybody ever tried to rate a tornado?
And I would like to know why you can never get to the end of a rainbow.
What's the worst disaster in Iowa?
What are your top 3 movies that involve weather?
Welcome to Weathered Questions, where we answer the questions on your radar.
Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of Weathered Questions. We're going to have a whole lot of fun things here this episode, including the answering of some of your questions that you have submitted. Myself, I'm meteorologist Kaj O'Mara, alongside meteorologist Jan Kaj. We encourage you to leave a review, tell your friends and family about us. We really appreciate everybody listening and all the interaction, too, via email with your questions. So really appreciate all that. Hopefully you had a great time last week learning all about tornadoes and various things. And this week, we're kind of going to dive a little bit into some air quality stuff. And this is all because of you, the listeners, that have given us this content and these questions to go out there and get the answers to. But the first thing on the agenda this week, Jan, is going to be the cloud of the week. And you may not have heard of this cloud. It's not very common in the Midwest, I can tell you that. So this week, Jan, we're talking about a cap cloud. Let us know all about it.
Yeah, so cap clouds, they can come in a couple different flavors. But generally, if you've ever been to somewhere with mountains, and you've seen this, like, it looks like a little hat on top of the mountain, just a little kind of very flat, smooth cloud on top of the mountain, and it's just kind of right on the tip. That's a cap cloud, and they're really fun to see. Lenticular clouds, we've talked about those on and off before. I don't think we've done that in our official cloud of the week, but we've talked about them.
Yeah.
But cap clouds are a type of lenticular cloud, and so it's formed because of that air being forced up and over the mountain, and so yeah, that's how they form. But they do look really cool, and again, it's just this tiny little hat on top of the mountain. And if they are able to move away, then they are just kind of your more generic lenticular cloud at that point. But when they're sitting over that feature, that's when they're a cap cloud. That's it. Pretty short and simple on that one.
Yeah, and those are kind of like standing waves. If you think about science, where the air just goes over, zoop, and it just keeps going, and so it's stationary. Just sits there. If you are hiking up a mountain, you wouldn't want to see that. But otherwise, they are kind of cool looking. Sometimes people confuse those with UFOs, just kind of hovering there. But in reality, they're not. They're not.
Yeah, they have been called in as UFOs before, which
yes,
I find entertaining.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. So, the cap cloud, again, not common at all in the Midwest just because of our terrain. But when you head out to the Mountain West, you start seeing those a whole lot more. That is for sure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All right, let's move into our first question this week, which, like we said, we're going to talk a little bit of kind of some air quality and some warmer weather in the form of fire weather. So this question comes to us from Justin and Marion, and he's kind of asking about fire weather and mentions that he knows that relative humidity is a pretty big factor, and is asking about some of the other factors. He says, the wind and temperatures and timing of the year probably all play into it in some form. But his specific question is relative humidity and what other factors go into forecasting for fire danger?
Very good question. And I will say at the very start of my career, we never really talked about it much in the Midwest because it just didn't seem to happen very often. Yeah. We eventually had to start talking about it a lot more. But if you think about what does a fire need? Well, it needs oxygen, it needs a spark, it needs a fuel, right, to get it all going. And the number one question that I always got on what we call a red flag warning day or a high fire danger day was, how can it just start a fire? Well, the weather doesn't. Unless it's lightning, the weather doesn't. So on like a hot, windy afternoon in early March, let's say, I believe we actually had some high fire danger in Oklahoma earlier last week. So, yes, relative humidity plays into this. Justin acknowledges that wind plays into this. Yes, it does. But the thing about it is fuel. I think that might be one of the biggest things is fuel. Because when you're coming out of winter and going into fall, those are your two big windows for fire danger. In the Midwest, we see very little fire danger in July. Reason being, the crops are up, they have water in them, and typically our air is very humid. So if your air is extremely dry, there's not much ambient moisture around, probably means there's not much cloud cover around. It means your temperatures can start going up and your dew points stay the same, which means your relative humidity drops. And then if something were to catch on fire and the fuels are dry, stuff gets going really quickly because it has ample oxygen because the wind is blowing through it. And if everything is just dry, that's what fire wants. So if we go back to the very basics of a campfire, what do we use to put campfires out? We turn on the garden hose and wash them out. Mm-hmm. Or at the campsite, you go to the river, get a bucket and dump water on it, or however you want to do it. That's how it's usually done. So logically then, anything that's wet doesn't really bode well for burning. So that's why relative humidity is such a big driver of all this. And I think a really good way to tie the bow on this as a good analogy for especially the guys that are listening. I know plenty of women chefs, though. I do. But especially the guys that want to get their smokers out and say, all right, do you smoke chips that have been soaked in water to kind of keep them going longer? Or do you go dry so they burn hotter faster? Those are your two options. Now, thankfully, if you go the dry way, you kind of have a lack of oxygen in there, so you're not seeing anything get out of control. If you're going the wet way, it's going to sit there and smolder. Depending on what kind of smoke you want on your pork or your beef or whatever, that's what you choose. But typically in the fire weather ingredients, especially with red flag warnings, gusty winds, low relative humidity, and what might be the secret ingredient to everything is dry fuel. Dry grass or dead brush. Those are the two big ones, I think, that really drive that one.
Yeah, I really don't have anything more to say. You did great, Ty. Good job. Well done.
But that's why we see harvest fires in Iowa, because the stalks are all dried out.
Yeah.
And what happens is, some people logically ask, well, why did the field catch on fire? Well, it's because you've got hot farm equipment that's making contact with it, and stuff happens, right? I mean, it just happens. Every year we have field fires in Iowa, but we already had some fires earlier this year. We had one down in Tiffin, Iowa. We could actually see it from the satellite and radar. That was back in February. And now, as things get more and more humid, at least the fire danger for Iowa drops in the Midwest as we start to get more humid. But then in the fall, it'll come back. October, November, things are dead. We've had a frost, and I think it's all about the fuel and the dry air. So Justin, hopefully that helps you. If it doesn't, send us a follow-up and we'll get it all cleared up for you.
All right, and now for a quick pause to hear what Kai's favorite thing to smoke on the smoker is, because I feel like we can't just leave that hanging.
Pork roast.
Okay.
Pork roast. I'm afraid to do brisket.
Oh,
that's an expensive cut of meat.
My big brother makes a mean brisket. They have a smoker, and they're down in the Kansas City area, which, I mean, Kansas City barbecue, can't beat it, right? Oh.
Well,
shout out to my big brother.
We need to unite then, because I always think with pork roast, I can't overdo it, right? I got to get the thing to 200 degrees so it shreds right. But if I do that to brisket, it's game over. It's done. I'm going to dry it out. So I'm always afraid to do that.
It's a little more babysitting.
Little more, but
yeah.
The wild part is I've done pork roast before with rub on it, and sometimes that just burns. So now what I've done is I actually smoke it with no rub on it. And then when I shred it, I put all the spices in then and let it sit overnight.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Pro tips with Kai.
Don't do it on a high fire danger day, please.
No, please don't. Please be smart.
That gets us into our trivia, which we'll give you a chance to think about here after we say it. Here it comes. You got 4 possible options. It's not like last week's where we just had the one. So
we're being kinder this week.
We are. You have 4 options. Which weather pattern is most likely to increase wildfire danger over a several-day period? That might be the key on this question. A slow-moving high-pressure system, a stationary front, C, a cold front, or D, a coastal fog bank. Give you some time to think about that, and we'll be right back after this.
Hi, this is Tim from Salsa Guy Cafe. We've got some exciting new menu items to share. Try our new full breakfast menu at the Blair's Ferry Road location, featuring scratch-made favorites like Crunchberry French Toast. Our best seller, the Alfalfa's Experience Deli Sandwich, is still a must-have, and we have to brag. Our Conquistador burger was named one of Iowa's top 3 best burgers. Come try one on today.
Salsa Guy Cafe. We're not fast food, but we make great food first.
Today's trivia question.
All righty. Hopefully you've been able to think about your answer for this week's trivia question one more time, or relating it to Justin's question there about fire weather. So which weather pattern is most likely to increase fire danger over several days? Did you think it was a slow-moving high-pressure system, a stationary front, a cold front, or a coastal fog bank? The answer is a slow-moving high-pressure system. So let's kind of unpack these answer options here. Fronts tend to give us precipitation. Maybe not always, but a lot of them will. Usually they'll change temperature, they'll change pressure, they'll change wind direction and speed. They'll change a lot of things, but a lot of times we do get storms with them. That stationary front specifically, a lot of times we'll get kind of all-day rains. Those cold fronts are when we tend to get more of our explosive thunderstorms. And that fog bank, fog is clouds, which is moisture, right? And as Kai just told us, we don't like moisture when we're looking for fire weather. Not that we're ever really looking for fire weather, but out of all of these answers, the hot and dry weather that a slow-moving high-pressure system would give us, that is going to be the most concerning thing for a meteorologist looking at potential for fire danger over the next several days.
Yep, and especially so in the Midwest. Now, there is a caveat to all this. There is one part of the country where high pressure still plays a role, but it's not a hot, dry high. It's an Arctic high. And that is in January over the Great Basin. When that cold, dense air rushes down the mountains, it dries, it compresses, and it flows down to Los Angeles. And that's how we got those huge fires last year in 2025. So, but regardless, high pressure was involved. The movement, because what's going to happen is wind is going to flow from the high to the low. So if you've got a high that's in the area, around the outside of that high, you're going to have some wind. You're going to have some wind. It's going to be warm. It's going to be dry. And again, the key word is definitely dry. So that is something that the fire weather forecasters are always looking at. And then, one more X factor, if you want to toss it in there, it's worth looking at the drought monitor too. It's worth looking to see, is this area in drought? Is it especially in moderate drought or worse? Now is our grassland, even healthy grassland in June that would normally be green and lush, is it brown and weird looking now? And could that be a source of fire?
Yep.
So there's all sorts of things that go into that kind of stuff. But of the 4 answers that we gave you, that was really the only one that had dry weather with it. Is the high.
Yep.
So
all
there you go.
The rest of them have quite a bit of moisture or expected moisture, right?
So you can pat yourself on the back if you got that one right. Now we're going to shift a little bit. So this still has to do with some smokiness and fire, but we're going to kind of translate this more to the air quality level. So this comes to us from Donna in Lynn County. What organization is reporting the air quality? Besides smoke, what other factors decrease air quality? When did air quality start to be reported? All good questions, Donna.
Yeah. So we'll start with the first one. Who is reporting air quality? Well, that is the good old EPA. So the Environmental Protection Agency, government agency. You hear us talk a lot about NOAA on here, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. EPA is another government entity that is responsible for, dealing with air quality and things adjacent to that. So that's the who. When did that start? I had to dig into this one. The EPA came about back in 1970, and they have been reporting air quality since they started, following the passage of the Clean Air Act. So that's when it started. Now, that said, if you pay attention to the news and stuff, there have been some cuts and stuff to EPA funding, and so that has actually impacted air quality monitoring. Just as an FYI, so if that's something that's important to you, let your people know about that, because those are directly related to each other, and getting all of those reports out. If you're looking at a weather app on your phone, if you're looking at something online, chances are you're getting EPA data in however it's being presented to you. It's probably all coming from that same source. Very similar to how NOAA radars are used on pretty much any weather app, or NOAA forecast systems are used on pretty much any weather app. EPA data is going to be fed in because it's public data, and so that's how that's happening. Again, this is very U.S. centric. That whole little bit that I just said. Other countries, I'm sure, have their own reporting agencies, probably through government. There's probably a few private things, but not quite as widespread. For us across the U.S., EPA is going to be the blanket kind of statement. There are a few smaller nuanced things, localized things. Maybe I know sometimes like allergists, for instance, will have their own different sensors set up, and so they will do their own local reporting, but it's generally for a city or a county or something like that. It's not going to be widespread. So that's pretty much all there. Before I go on to what else can decrease air quality, do you have anything to add there, Kai?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I may have a NWS product to talk about, but go ahead.
Ooh, exciting. A little
Yeah.
tease there. So then the third question in this bunch was, besides smoke, what other factors decrease air quality? So smoke is obviously going to be a bigger one, but also just general pollutants, which I feel like used to be the bigger concern, but suddenly we are turning more towards smoky skies and fire weather. But think about those classic pictures that you see of a smoggy city, or something like that. Any of those kind of industrial pollutants, we'll call them, those are going to impact air quality. And so when you're looking at like the air quality index, I'm going to pull it up real quick for myself to see what they have on there right now. But it usually gives you a couple different things of what exactly they are looking at in that exact moment. But most of them are going to be varieties of, again, those more industrial pollutants. Here they call them PM 2.5. I knew they were Ps, but I don't, I guess, know what the Ps stand for. Ozone's another one. That's always going to be up there. You'll see that different bigger cities will sometimes on their traffic signs will say like ozone warning. So car pollutants, things like that as well will impact air quality in those larger industrialized areas.
It's wonderful at the top of our atmosphere, but terrible on the ground.
Correct.
Ozone is a pollutant near the surface, but it is wonderful up in the top layer of the atmosphere to help protect us from the sun. Ozone's kind of the double-edged sword right there, for sure.
Yeah, you're right. It's just like anything, right? Too much of a good thing. It's good in places. It's where it's supposed to. When it's where it's supposed to be, it's a good thing. When it's not, then it's can be a problem. Do you have a product for us to look at? I'm curious now.
Yeah. This doesn't get issued very often. It might only get issued once a year, maybe less, depending on where you're listening to us from. Occasionally, the Weather Service will issue something called an air stagnation advisory. And basically what that means is the air isn't moving. And as a result, we're not seeing any what we call mixing in the atmosphere, at least very limited. So what that means is, especially in the mornings, we have a lot of buildup of air pollution and industrial gases because they're still being emitted. But because the temperatures are cooler down near the ground versus aloft, the air can't really mix. It stays down near the ground. It stays trapped near the ground. So an air stagnation advisory comes out, but it has to be a pretty major buildup. Their definition says major buildup, but they don't give a number. So I'm assuming that they work with the DNR and EPA on that as to, what are we dealing with? It's probably a local level, most likely. But sometimes you'll see that during heat waves. You'll see excessive heat warnings. I guess they're what is the new term now? Heat warning? Is it just excessive heat warning maybe, or extreme heat warning?
Yeah.
I know it just changed recently. Hot weather, basically. But getting directly underneath a severe heat wave, the air doesn't tend to move much. It gets very hazy. You might notice that it gets extremely hazy, especially if it's a very humid heat wave. So that's another thing.
Sometimes you'll see that coupled with festivities in early July as well, where everyone's shooting off fireworks,
smoke particulates at night, absolutely
late at night, which is, there you go, another pollutant, right? But because of the cooling of the atmosphere during the overnight hours and that extra kind of supercharge of particulates in the atmosphere, a lot of times, even still the next morning, July 5th, you'll have very smoky skies and lingering air and very poor air quality.
Yep. Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. So, and there's a lot of research to talk about that. It's not just the sound that sometimes causes issues, but they can actually see that, on a national scale where things kind of change because of all that. So that definitely took us down a rabbit hole, Donna. But I hopefully that
an
that answered your
informative
question.
rabbit hole.
Yes. But
All right.
there's a lot to it for sure.
So let's wrap this up here in our last few minutes with a nice shiny red bow. Red flag warnings. We alluded to those a few times throughout the episode. That basically is our fire danger alert that the National Weather Service will issue. But a lot of people are very perplexed by why is it called that? Why is it called a red flag warning? Why isn't it just called fire danger? Why isn't it called fire warning, right? So Kai, can you unpack that for us a little bit?
It's a great question because everything else has kind of come around to, I would say, more modern language. This one has held in the past for quite some time. And, part of this goes back to military, flying red flags for danger. Some of this goes back, I've also heard, to ranger stations, flying red flags for
I've heard that one
high
too.
fire dangers. But then you also think about, how do we talk in our everyday life? If you're doing a job interview with somebody and you come back and your boss says, "See any red flags on there?" It just dawned on me that, red flag, I guess, does mean like caution, danger. NASCAR stops a race when there's a red flag because of a dangerous situation. So I guess that's where it comes from.
Bring it really into the, the 2020s. You've got dating apps and people say, "Oh, any red flags, green flags, beige flags."
I'm so glad I never had to do that. I met my wife at a party at night and I wasn't even supposed to be there. That was my story. Thankfully, I was never on a dating app. I've never done that. I don't want to do that.
I have no.
If there are red flags on there, I'm sure there's plenty.
But again, to your point, that's what you talk like when you're like, "Ooh, that is not a person I want to deal with," whether it's in dating or jobs or whatever else. That's how you refer to it, right? You say, "Ooh, red flag, green flag."
Yeah, could be an interesting situation for sure. But what's interesting is how we've modernized some of the other terms, but we have not seemed to progress forward on that one because the watch product that goes into that. So, the winter products have been simplified. Winter storm watch goes to winter storm warning. Winter storm watch goes to ice storm warning. Heat watch goes into heat warning. It's actually fire weather watch first, and then red flag warning second. So the terms really don't agree. And I don't know if we're ever going to see fire weather warning come around. I think it would be wise of us to do that someday in the next 5 to 6 years, just to keep the terminology as logical as possible. But then again, I also think all right, red flag warning has worked for a long time. People seem to understand what they are. And especially in fire climates where it's more common to have those, I think a lot of it, Jan, is where we get into an extreme drought in like southern Wisconsin. And somebody goes, "I've been here 20 years, never heard of this in my life." Yeah. That's where it becomes a problem.
Yes.
But people in California or in Colorado, red flag warning, they were born with that.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, I'm thinking
yeah,
back of all the travel I've done out west, and when you're driving through national parks or the Rocky Mountains or stuff, literally you'll pass their fire stations and they will have a board on the front that has like a speedometer looking thing from green to red, right? And
yep,
they will change
absolutely.
that on the daily, and when there is actual bad fire weather, they will fly the red flag, and that is make sure everybody around knows and is alerted to that danger. And so it's very very old fashioned.
Yeah, it is. But if that's the way it is, and that's the way it is, and I think it at least makes sense. At least it's a color that goes with danger. And I still, on
Unless you're
family
colorblind.
trips, thanks for that. If we go on family trips, like campgrounds and ranger stations, we'll still see fire weather today, fire weather index. There's still Smokey the Bear up there in Michigan. In our family trip, we drive by a couple of parks, and there's
Hmm.
the bear. Today's
Yep.
fire danger is,
Yep.
so it still works. But that's a great question. It's old, though. It goes back a long time, back to the military and fire station and ranger station type of deals. And you literally raise the red flag when there's a danger. So I
Yeah.
think it was just that simple, Jan.
Yeah, it really
For
was.
that.
Well,
Yeah.
another wonderful episode. Thank you guys for sticking with us for another half an hour of your day. Be sure to submit your questions if you thought of anything throughout this episode, had any curiosities come to mind, related or unrelated. And as you can tell, we do weather and weather adjacent things, right? With space, with geology, all the things. It's part of being a broadcast meteorologist. You become a station scientist and you just kind of become an expert in lots of sciencey things. And we love to geek out with you. So please send those in to weatheredquestions@gmail.com. Join the conversation. Until next week, stay safe.